Alright guys, back with another video for you today, and back with doing another question and answer video. These are your questions that you've submitted to me either via email, sometimes comments, and sometimes from Instagram questions, maybe even Facebook. But these are ones that you guys asked me, and I've got 12 of your questions answered today in this video. So if you want to find out some of these question and answers, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. That's right. I'm going to be doing this series going forward by doing at least once or twice a month. And they're going to be long format videos, and sometimes you're going to see some of the sections of the long format video as separate videos. So for finding the topics much more easier on the channel rather than watching a long format video. But they are going to be long format when I first air them, and I will choose which topics that I think would be better off as a separate video. So anyway, sit back and listen to some of the questions that you guys have submitted. And if you're interested in submitting some questions, you can always send those questions to me at lfsgquestions@gmail.com. But before I get to the questions, if this is your first time tuning into the channel and you still haven't subscribed, please do click the subscribe button below, and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. Before I get to the questions though, if you haven't caught my Perfume fragrances video, please do. I have one of the fragrances featured in one of the questions today from the Perfume video, so stay tuned for that. But we're going to go ahead and get started with question one. Question one comes from Carol. Hi, I saw one of your YouTube videos during my search for a new cologne for my husband and was so excited to hear you welcome emails. He's 56 and he's been wearing polo since I met him 32 years ago. I really need a different scent for him. I have been buying samples based on descriptions and I'm not getting anywhere. He's great. He will wear what I like. My favorite from back in the day is Aramis. I'd like something like that but more current. All of the colognes today seem very sweet to me. I'm looking for a masculine scent that is not sweet. Something sexy, warm, sophisticated, woodsy, musky. I got a few Tom Ford samples, Oud Wood, Grey Vetiver, Tuscan Leather. I had high hopes, but none of those are what I'm looking for. Any recommendations would be seriously appreciated. Thanks so much. This is a great question because I recently have been speaking about Polo from Ralph Lauren, and even though when you first spray this fragrance and when you smell it out of the bottle, it smells fantastic, but I think with the reformulations the fragrance doesn't smell as good anymore. In the dry down it smells pretty funky to me. Sad. It's sad because it used to be a great fragrance and my dad wore it a lot, and I stole sprays from him from when he was wearing it, although he had a splash bottle. It's a spray bottle now. But this is a masculine kind of a fougere, or maybe I think it's a chypre, come to think of it, a masculine chypre fragrance which settles to a leather, and the leather in here doesn't seem that great. So it's interesting that this person's Carol's husband still wears this, and seems like with the fact that she likes Aramis, she prefers the more classic fragrances, and I agree with her with in regards to sweet fragrances. Fragrances have gotten really sweet. I don't hate sweet fragrances, but I generally do not like the mass market sweet fragrances generally. There are some exceptions to the rule. So I thought today I would give Carol some suggestions on some fragrances that I think that she might like for her husband. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Guerlain's Bois Mysterio here. So this one has classic touches to me. It's a woody aromatic leather fragrance, a great smelling fragrance. It has a very sexy musky touch to it, and it does have that cumin note which blends really beautifully with somebody's body chemistry. So I think this is a great fragrance that I highly recommend. And judging from the fact that Carol likes Polo and then also that Aramis fragrance, I think this is definitely something that's very modern that could be appreciated for someone that likes fragrances that are classic but want something a little more modern. So this one also has the bay laurel leaf note, but it's a beautiful fragrance. So that's one that Carol can try for her husband. But this one definitely is very, very modern, but also I guess I would say it's kind of sort of classic. It's from Gucci, Guilty Absolute Pour Homme, this one right here. It's a leather vetiver combination, very masculine, definitely masculine leaning, and I figured this is, once again leather here with the fact that Bois Mysterio is also leather, and Polo, settles to a leather. And I believe Aramis is also a leather fragrance. So this is kind of what I was thinking. But I kind of left off Tom Ford since Carol said that Tom Ford samples were tried and didn't like him. But this was really sort of on an animalic side, but it doesn't go like full-on niche animalic. I think this is designer animalic, so they're not necessarily overly animalic to me, like really smelling like, you know, a civet and things like that. Just I think the leather in here is a little on animalic side. So it's a bold fragrance. I recommend this one, so definitely try that one as well, Carol. Now, one fragrance I spoke about yesterday, Bois Blanc from Frappin. Definitely a classy masculine offering with ginger as a spicy, zingy, fresh note, but the fragrance settles to a warmer, woodsy composition or concoction. So I recommend something like this. And this is kind of in line with something like Declaration from Cartier. They're not identical, but I recommend this as well. Bois Blanc from Frappin. Cartier's Declaration Parfum once again focuses on spices, woods, cardamom and cedar wood, I believe, are here, and then there's some orangey touch in here as well. The citrus in here, it's here as well. So those are definitely fragrances I recommend for someone that's looking for something masculine. The new H24 from Hermes, definitely something different. It's a minerally metallic fragrance. It's slightly ozonic, but it's different. You know, it's not anything like today's sweet designer mass fragrances for men. And I recommend it. I really find this one to be great. It just tends to be a little on the lighter side as my wearing experience, so be warned for that one. But I think that's a great suggestion for something that would be a great men's fragrance that's very, very modern. This next one's from the house of Bottega Veneta. This is Pour Homme. So the Pour Homme from Bottega Veneta I think is a great leather once again, but this is not the dense kind of leather. Plus it's very aromatic and piney, so this might be a very, very modern interpretation of something like Polo. It's not a Chypre. I think it's more of an aromatic woody fragrance, leather, but also one thing about this fragrance is it wears a little light too, unlike Polo back in the day. But I think it's a great fragrance that you should look into for your husband because it's got those piney notes and the leather and the aromatic touches. So that's Bottega Veneta Pour Homme. Now, two fragrances that might lean a little sweet, but I wanted to highlight them. This is him from Zadig & Voltaire. It's a vanilla, but it's a incense, sandalwood, grapefruit, black pepper. So it's spicy. It is sweet, but I feel like all the other notes kind of like cross out the sweetness of the vanilla. So it's not an overly sugary sweet. It's sweet, but again, you have the spices of black pepper, you've got the incense, you've got the sandalwood that's ultra woody, and a little bit of a zing from grapefruit. I think this is a great suggestion. Now this is another one I'm going to speak about that might lean a little sweet. This is Pacha de Cartier Parfum. I'm featuring two Cartier fragrances today. This is a flanker to the original that came out in the early 90s, and this is an Oriental Fougère. So it's barbershop, but it has those Oriental touches, so there are some sweet touches, but it's not like a sugary sweet fragrance. Plus it's sort of classic leaning, so this is something that you like, Aramis and Polo. So I recommend this one for not only the sandalwood that's in here, but the fougère notes that are in here, and then also the oriental notes. I really love this one. I think your husband might like it as well. So that's Pacha Cartier de Parfum. And then this particular fragrance I don't speak much about, and I recently pulled it out and I really fell in love with it over again. Loewe is a fragrance house I don't speak much about, but 001 Man in the Eau de Parfum is fantastic. It's kind of a vegetal savory fragrance experience, and there is some light sweetness in there, but boy, this is so good. It's powdery and kind of irisy, but there's some light cuminy touches in there, but the powderiness doesn't come from iris. According to the my notes, it comes from carrots. Carrots, iris kind of have similarities. So in the end, it's a great scent. It's very, very sexy, and I think your husband would really like this one. And last but not least, I'm going to feature Royal Oud from the House of Creed. This is on the pricier side here. I think this is probably the most expensive fragrance. Royal Oud is a great, great cedar fragrance. It has a little bit of a ashy tobacco kind of a base, but it has green notes and it's very, very woody. I guess it's sexy too, and it reminds me of the cedar trees. Very, very fresh and aromatic experience, but a wonderful, very, very classy, elegant, a gentlemanly fragrance wearing experience. My favorite Creed fragrance, Royal Oud. So those are the ones that I think Carol should try for you know, buying a fragrance for her husband. I think definitely get samples first if you can, and maybe have him try them to see if he likes them. So those are what I would recommend. So question 2 comes from Matthew. I have a question pertaining to the differentiation of notes and accords in a fragrance. How do you learn to do so? It seems to me you'd have to know what amber smells like on its own to pick it out in a fragrance among other notes. Would I have to go out of my way to find each note on its own to know what it smells like? How did you learn to really study fragrance? I would love to start understanding the complexities of fragrance, but it seems difficult to start. Did you take a course or did you just start buying fragrances and smelled them all? Take Bleu de Chanel. I can tell when I put it on that it changes over time, but I have no idea what each note is and what it smells like. All I get is the blend of any fragrance. I'm sure it's a skill, but I would just like to know how to learn it. Thank you for your time. Now that is a great, great question. So the way to answer this question is, so I come from a family that loves, you know, gardening and flowers and plants and trees and herbs, and also come from a family that loves good food. You know, everything, the ingredients that were in my home was the best of the best, because cooking, you want the best flavors and things like that. So I grew up around all of this stuff. Dad was a gardener. He planted a lot of stuff, and I loved smelling all the stuff he was planting, not only the flowers and the fruits and the trees and, you know, anything. I smelled every single thing. So I was actually very, very nerdy in that I would also learn the names and the scientific names of the plants and things like that. I don't remember them now, but as a kid, I was really obsessed with plants and flowers and things like that. Of course, obsessed with the smells as well. But also, going to the mom side, mom was like the best cook ever. So she, like I said, she used all the best ingredients. So I would smell all the ingredients that she would have, all the spices she would have, the vegetables, the meats, everything. You know, I just trained my nose to identify smells. So I guess for me with this hobby, that has a lot to do with my recognizing of smells. But also, I guess what I would say is start just identifying certain smells and fragrances. That's the first thing I would do. But early on in this journey, and I've been doing this for a while now, going on 10 years, I started doing my first reviews in 2012. That channel is no longer, obviously. But it was a little more challenging at first, but you get to learn what, you know, smells are supposed to smell like, or certain ingredients are supposed to smell like. I guess in regards to amber, amber is created with the multiple different notes to create an accord. It's not really used in perfumery, the amber notes. So as I said, it's like vanilla. They use resins and labdanum to create the amber accord. So once you smell some of these notes, vanilla, you know, labdanum, benzoin, then you'll start recognizing them in the smells. One of the other things is my religious upbringing, Christian Orthodox, so our church was full of incense. So you'd smell all these smells. I guess I was always curious about smells as a kid, so I got to learn the smells and recognize them. So in the end, throughout my journey with this hobby, not only was it helpful for me to know the smells, but also the actual ingredients it came from to recognize them. But you can't just unless you have the most amazing nose, I don't think anybody that just jumps into it is going to start recognizing different things. It does take some time. It does take a lot of practice. Plus, I went and smelled so much stuff. I go to conferences, perfume shows, go to stores constantly. Not since the pandemic, though. But I just trained my nose to recognize smells. The other thing I would do is I buy some notes, and not necessarily like perfumer's notes, but, you know, in general, like an herb, let's say for example lavender, you know what it smells like, and try and smell it next to a lavender fragrance like a fougere or something that just uses lavender. So you kind of like try and see how similar they are. Or, you know, I've done shows or videos on the channel with Dana, who's you know, very nerdy, and she likes notes and notes breaks down. So we've done several videos, like for example tonka beans. Tonka beans, you get to learn what tonka beans smell like, but you know, you also get to learn some of the accords they create. They might smell like tobacco, they might smell like nutty almonds and things like that. So all of that stuff kind of is just a journey of learning. So it might take some time, but if you want to learn what things smell like and how to, you know, point out different notes in a fragrance, I just say start smelling, just constantly smelling. Train your nose to smell things, and that's what I would recommend for you to do. But it does take time. I mean, as I said, for me, it's been since I was a kid, obsessed with smells. I mean, some of the things I used to do is mom takes me to a grocery store, I'd be opening up bottles and smelling things and seeing what the notes are on there, like the ingredients, and see if that really does smell like that. So it will take some time, but I think you can totally accomplish it. All right, question 3 comes from Ty. Hi, my name is Ty. I love watching your review and channel. Thanks so much. I am also live in the Bay Area and close to you. I've learned so much about fragrances from you. Thank you. I have a question for you. I'm interested in purchasing a couple bottle from Roja Perfume. I never smelled the fragrance and have no idea what it smells like. I have a couple bottle in my bag on Bergdorf Goodman and just waiting to check out. Due to COVID-19, I don't think I can return it if I don't like it. This is a blind buy. I'm interested in Danger, Creation E, and maybe Oud Cristal. However, I don't know what to buy either from the woman collection or man collection. I tend to love unisex scent. I want to ask for your advice on what to get. I don't like fragrances are overly powdery or too sweet or too flowery. I love unisex scents. Do you think I can pull it off for Creation E and Danger in the man's collection? Thank you for reading my email and much appreciated. So, wow, this is kind of a big expense to buy, you know, blind. So first thing I would recommend is not to buy it blind, especially due to COVID. Find a resource that sells samples and buy samples first to test, because Roja Parfums fragrances are pretty expensive. So that's the first advice I would give you. Now, in regards to Creation E and Danger Pour Homme, both of those Pour Hommes, I'm not too experienced with the feminine fragrances. I know some of the unisex fragrances, obviously, but I don't have any of the feminine targeted fragrances from Roja Parfums. But in regards to Creation E, it is sweet, so it does get sweet and boozy, and I think it also gets a little powdery on me. But in regards to Danger Pour Homme, if you don't like sweet, I would go with Danger Pour Homme. That would be one I would recommend. Both of them are great fragrances. In fact, Creation E is my favorite of the two, but Danger has come up there. It's really, really great, and I love its whole woody, aromatic, spicy, patchouli combination. So I guess if you have the money and you're okay with striking out, then by all means do it. But if you're low on money or anything like that, I highly, highly recommend you test them out and you know, buy samples, because I don't think anybody in the Bay Area sells Roja currently. I know ZGO Perfumery does sell a few, but I'm not sure if they sell those two fragrances. But just buy samples. Find a resource to buy samples before you buy very, very expensive fragrances, because in the end, if you don't like them, and probably you might not. For example, if you're only used to department store fragrances, there's going to be a chance that you might not like these because they might be a little too out there, too natural smelling, too different, too perfumey, whatever. So I really, really highly recommend you test them out first, or sample, buy samples, as I said. But if I were you, those two are my favorite fragrances from Roja, two of the more favorite fragrances. And I think the one that leans more masculine would be danger pour homme. But then again, Creationy, even though it's masculine, I think it's also very unisex. I mean, both of them can be worn by women. Some women like more masculine fragrances, so they pull for the more masculine smelling fragrances. So as I said, best thing to do, buy some samples to see if you like them, and if you don't, then best that you don't spend the money. Other thing is, if you're shopping from some stores like a Lucky Scent, certain stores will send you a sample along with the fragrance, so that if you're going to test it, you're going to test a sample of that fragrance you bought, so that if you don't like it, you won't open the the actual fragrance, and so you will return it, rather than if you open it. And I don't know what the return policy for Bergdorf Goodman's is. You might not be able to return it since the fragrance is open. So those are my thoughts on that particular scenario. Buy a sample. Question 4 says, thank you for all your reviews on fragrances. They are really helpful. I just wanted to ask your opinion on the difference between MFK's Aqua Universalis Forte and Petit Matin. If you could just buy one, which one would it be and why? I prefer long-lasting, strong fragrances, but I know most freshies don't last very long. The problem for me is that both smell similar, and to my nose is not sophisticated enough to figure out the differences. I prefer feminine leaning fragrances if that makes a difference. Can you help? The first thing I would say is both of those fragrances are unisex. Some people might think they are feminine leaning, but I think they're definitely unisex. And for me, they're both citruses. But the way I differentiate the two, I find Petit Matin to be a very watery fragrance experience, and then Aqua Universalis Forte to be a very musky experience. I personally, with my experience, I haven't tested them out side by side. For me, Aqua Universalis Forte lasts longer, and I love its whole musky cleanness. The lemony cleanness is what I get with that one, and I really do enjoy it. But I like both of them. I think Francis Cruikshank has created some of the best fragrances, and those are some of his better freshies. But if I were you, if you want long lasting, I would go with Aqua Universalis Forte. I like it for its muskiness, it's soapy, it's clean, it's lemony, and that's what I would recommend for a toss-up between the two. But if you want it to be more airy and a little more transparent and watery, as I said, because I feel like there's an ozonic touch running throughout Petit Matin, just get that watery experience rather than a kind of a thicker, musky experience. And I think that's what you would do is Petit Matin. Both of them are great fragrances. I love this house. MFK, Maison Francis Cruikshank, is a great house, and I enjoy both of those fragrances. It's a toss-up for me. Question 5 comes from G. Nunez. What are your favorites from Xerjoff? A top 10 or 20, please. Can you share your opinions on and compare and contrast Diptyque 34 Boulevard Saint Germain EDT versus 34 Boulevard Saint Germain EDP? So for me, when I first bought 34 Boulevard Saint Germain from the house of Diptyque way back in the late 2010s, I was told that that's a fragrance with notes that's pulled from different popular fragrances from Diptyque to create a unique fragrance with the address of the original Diptyque store in Paris. Yes, I wore it quite a bit. This was before I started doing reviews in 2012, so I think it was like 2010 when I bought it, somewhere around there. And I enjoyed what I smelled. I loved its dry down. It was great dry down, but I kind of forgot about it. And last year when Barney's closed, I did buy a second bottle from their on their clearance rack when they were clearing out all the fragrances. But recently, also I bought a brand new bottle of the Eau de Parfum because I had smelled it at one point at Barney's and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's a much deeper, a little darker, maybe more patchouli-esque version of the original, and if I had to pick between the two, I would much prefer the EDP. The EDP is actually really, really delicious. It just lasts much longer on me. It's not as airy as the original, so the original is just doesn't feel the denseness. You can't feel that density of the fragrance, and some of the notes in there, the fig from the Philosophus is in there. Some of the other popular fragrances have notes featured in that fragrance as well, but in comparison to the new version, the EDP, it's not as thick, it's not as dense, and it's not as long lasting. But some of you might prefer the, you know, the lighter experiences, and some of you prefer the deeper, richer experiences. I prefer the deeper, richer experiences, and I'm obsessed with the EDP. It just smells fantastic on me. It's really, really long lasting. The dry down is fantastic, even better than the original Eau de Toilette version of 34 Boulevard Saint Germain, and I recommend it. It is pricier, definitely pricier in a smaller bottle, so you have less juice for, you know, more of less juice, more money, but in the end you're using less, you know, less juice because it does last longer. But the thing is, as I said, it's not as bright as the original. The original is just overly bright. It has lots of brightness to it, and I feel like if you're into the more brighter fragrances, even though it still has, you know, some substance to it, go with the original. But I think for me, the EDP is fantastic. I absolutely love the smell, love the dry down, and that's what I think about those two fragrances. Perhaps I'll do a full, you know, comparison of the two. But also in regards to the Xerjoff video, there probably will be one coming up sometime in the near future. I'm not sure when, but yeah, I've thought about doing a top 10 or top 20 for Xerjoff, and stay tuned for that. Question 6 comes from Geronimo. Hi, really love your YouTube channel. Congrats. Keep on rocking it. I want to ask you about a recommendation. I live in Dominican Republic, 85% summer, warm weather, and I really love Still Life by Olfactive Studio. Some issues with the longevity, but still love it. Is a fresh and at the same time boozy scent, tremendous deliciousness. Fresh and boozy, and the thing I like about the boozy part is that it smells like dark rum, not light. Still Life in Rio is a little bit stronger. Can you tell me any other fragrance with that idea and composition, fresh and boozy, that I could reach out for? Thanks a lot. So this is a contradictory question for me, because I never really look for fragrances that are fresh and boozy at the same time, because I want my boozy fragrances to be deep and rich, just the way I like them, warm and spicy, things like that. So it matters to you because you live in a very hot climate and you don't want the density, you want the freshness, but you still want it boozy. So I don't really have any fragrances in my collection that can be, you know, thought of as fresh and boozy. But if you can still get your hands on by Kilian Straight to Heaven with a Twist of Lemon, this one right here, that one I recommend. I mean, I recommend Straight to Heaven to wear in the summertime as well, but it might be a little too much for you in the humid weather, because for me, Straight to Heaven in the summertime just totally sweetens up and comes alive with the fruitiness and the vanilla. The booziness pops and the patchouli just really, really amplifies. I absolutely love it in the hot weather. It just might be too much for you in the hot weather, but if you can get your hands on Straight to Heaven with a Twist of Lemon, I do recommend it. But two other fragrances I'm going to talk about that are boozy from designers. L'Insoumis from the house of Lalique, a great boozy fougere. Really, really great. I think this is not overly thick as a fragrance, so you should be able to pull this one off in the summertime, and I love the way it smells, and it's totally boozy. It's a fougere, a boozy fougere. Really, really great. So check L'Insoumis out if you can get your hands on it. Another one I would recommend is Guerlain Homme Le Boisé. This one is the fresher take on the original Homme, and I think Homme Eau de Toilette is not around anymore. The Eau de Parfum is, so I felt like that one is a lot thicker for the hotter temperatures, but I think this here with its rum note, I think it's great. It's vetiver, it's earthy, it's woody, it's boozy, and has some mint in it as well. Just control your sprays, but I think if you want some booziness that's also on the fresher side, I would go with these two fragrances. Now, the Straight to Heaven with a Twist of Lemon, it probably is going to be a lot challenging for you to get your hands on, but if you can, check for it. Okay, question 7 comes from Claudia. Dear Sebastian, I've already learned a lot from your videos. Thank you for that. I really love your new series. So cool that you can be asked questions now. Maybe you know whether there is a perfume that smells like burnt, smoky lavender. That would be really, really great. Another thing, one of my favorite perfumes from Santa Maria Novella was Tobacco. Unfortunately, this fragrance was renewed to Tobacco Toscano at some point and smells completely different. Do you know a secret source or catacomb where they sell the old tobacco? or something similar. Thank you very much in advance for answering my questions, and all the best regards from Berlin. Okay, in regards to a lavender that's smoky, I don't really have any fragrances in my collection that's ultra smoky with a lavender, but I do have a fragrance from the House of Florists called Vert Fougère, this one right here, and it is a smoky fougère with lavender in the notes. So it does have lavender, but it has other herbs and aromatics in there to create the fougère like smell. So perhaps this might work for you, but I think it's a male targeted fragrance from florists, and it might be too masculine, I don't know, but it definitely is smoky. It's overdose of smoke with the whole fougère like thing. So it's great, it's a great fragrance, but you know, it might be a little off-putting for some people because it's smoky, but then you're asking for smoke, a smoky lavender, so definitely check it out. If you like herbs in general, in addition to lavender, I think this one should satisfy. I do have a full review of Vert Fougère if you want to go check that out. And in regards to the Tobacco Toscano versus Tobacco from Santa Maria Novella. So I bought my first bottle of Santa Maria Novella's Tobacco Toscano back in 2012. No, 2013, in the south of France, where they had a Santa Maria Novella boutique in Cannes. So I've been a fan of that fragrance for quite a while. In fact, I'm going to be putting together a video on it very, very soon, that particular fragrance. But I've never smelled their original tobacco, so I really can't compare. But for me, Tobacco Toscano is more like a gourmand tobacco. It's more of a creamy woods tobacco. And it's also not overly tobacco-ish. It's more like hints of tobacco. So I can't compare it to the original because I've never smelled it, so I wouldn't know what it smells like to recommend it. But as far as Tobacco Toscana goes, I really do love this one, and I feel like it's pretty popular. People do recommend it quite frequently. People do mention it in comments on my videos, so I feel like it's come up quite a bit. But I've never heard of the original tobacco. I don't know if any of you watching knows about it. Do let me know, put a comment down below. But personally, I can't recommend anything to replace that particular smell, as I've never smelled it. All right, question 8 comes from Robert. Good evening, Sebastian. I was noticing that in my collection I'm starting to obtain backup bottles of scents that I either love or am afraid of possible reformulations, and of course being discontinued. What's your opinion on the subject? Do you think it's worth it to keep backup bottles or continue searching out new products? My notable backups are Rive Gauche, Bois de Portugal, Armani Vetiver d'Hiver, YSL Tuxedo, L'Homme Ideal Cologne, Sartorial, Fougère d'Argent, and Beau de Jour. I'm now considering backup bottles of Naxos and Incident Diplomatique. Do you think it's worth it, and what potential scents do you think will become future classics worth holding on to? Thanks for reading. Hope to hear back from you. I think the brands that are notorious for reformulating are some of the brands you mentioned, Armani, YSL. They're definitely notorious for reformulating. So if you're fearing reformulations and you have a favorite fragrance, buy one backup, not more than one, because what happens is reformulations really happen if there's some kind of a regulation from IFRA that comes up. Then the whole industry goes and reformulates certain fragrances because there's that ingredient that has something come up via IFRA. So there is that scenario. But I think they've regulated a lot of fragrances, notes that I don't think anything is coming up, but I could be wrong. But in general, I would stick to the brands that are known notoriously for reformulating. Brands like Germaine or Xerjoff, I don't think reformulate much, but some of them do go through reformulations, and people do notice differences. Yes, it's very noticeable, and one fragrance to another is definitely noticeable. But I think like Tom Ford's Beau de Jour might not be reformulated. I don't know. I can't say 100% that they will be reformulated and then 100% that they can't be reformulated. It's all up in the air, and people definitely do notice the differences. Sometimes very, very minutely you can notice the difference. And sometimes, you know, they do a good job of reformulating where it doesn't smell like, where it does smell like the previous version, but then you notice that it doesn't perform as well or something. So all these scenarios exist, but if I were you, I would focus on the big notorious brands. Any of the big conglomerates, most of the time they're going to reformulate. Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, LVMH, things like that. If you have fragrances from those, houses or, conglomerates, even something like Penhaligon's, who is owned by Puig, will most likely reformulate. But I wouldn't worry too much about, brands like Germaine or Xerjoff. I think they're not in the market to keep reformulating, except, obviously, as I said, if there's a new regulation passed by IFRA and it's a whole industry-wide kind of a deal, then they're all going to reformulate. But then again, there's some houses also here in the States that don't comply with IFRA. One of them is Rogue Perfumery. So if you're in the, if you're thinking of why do I need to buy all these backup bottles? It's costing me too much money. Maybe I focus on a brand that will not reformulate because of IFRA. But then again, I think some do. I mean, I've known perfume houses, and I'm not saying them, that have mentioned that they've reformulated it or they've changed it up a little bit. So you can notice differences even from indies and niches brands. But they generally try and make the fragrances to smell identical, and their reformulations sometimes to make them even more extreme or intense versus like to tone it down. So you'll notice some differences even from the indies and the niches, but generally with my experience from these smaller brands is they make the reformulation to be for the better for us. So I don't know, it's a toss-up. I have backup bottles because I knew of certain fragrances I couldn't get. Like I have 4 or 5 backup bottles, maybe even 6 of Dior and Parfum, because I knew it was kind of a toss-up. It was up in the air. Is it going to, survive? Is it going to, get the axe? So I wasn't wanting to take a risk, so I bought all my backups of that one. But I don't have a lot of backups of other fragrances. Do I? Not a lot. I mean, there might be a few here because I'm running low on a few, but I don't have backup bottles unless you hear something is discontinued. I mean, there are fragrances I have because they're discontinued, I have backup bottles of, but unless you think that a fragrance is going to get the axe, then don't bother unless you know it's from the bigger conglomerates and they're known for reformulating. That's the thing. If you have noticed a reformulation from a fragrance from one to the other, then most likely it won't get the another reformulation anytime soon, but everything is still up in the air. And as I said, some reformulations do go to the better. I mean, sometimes they are better reformulations. They're not all necessarily bad reformulations. Some people also experience fragrances differently. Sometimes I think a fragrance might have gotten a better reformulation and some people complain about it, whereas I complain about a fragrance being reformulated and some people come back and say, no, that fragrance is much better now that it's reformulated. So it's all very subjective. You have to decide what you want to do. If you want to have a backup bottle of a fragrance you think might get discontinued, definitely buy it. If you have the money, definitely buy it. But then again, there's also the fact that you might have the fragrance laying around and you get tired of it, then you have to sell it, yada yada. So it's just a, kind of a game. It's a hobby, it's a fun thing. You've got the money, you go ahead. If you get tired of it, you can always sell it on eBay or something, or a Facebook group or something. But those are my thoughts. I think you just have to decide. But just keep in mind the conglomerates. Anything that's under a conglomerate is definitely always getting reformulated, always. I think fragrances are constantly getting reformulated, constantly. Like, they're always changing, but there's such little amounts of change that we don't notice it, That's why they have all these codes for the fragrances, which you can look and see when it was, distributed and the date and all that kind of stuff. And people, dig deep into that particular topic and say, okay, this particular batch is really strong, really long lasting. That next one that came after was really, really weak. It didn't last at all. So yeah, I mean, they have all these codes for you to be able to tell when it was, produced and all that kind of stuff. So this is a bigger topic, but I think you have to decide what you want to do with the fragrances. And if you have the money to have backups, by all means, buy a backup. But always look to see who owns the brand and what they're known for. Okay, question 9 comes from Mikal. I really count on your reviews when I'm looking for a new fragrance. Thanks for all the content. 1. Who is your favorite perfumer and what is their best fragrance? 2. What is the most you'd personally spend on a bottle of cologne? I'm looking to buy something from the Xerjoff house, but I already have Naxos and Renaissance. Need a video on best Xerjoff scents, please. 3. I've seen a lot of Gourmand videos on your channel. Is that your favorite note? Further, do you own any fragrance marketed towards women? I thought Gourmand was feminine. So I thought that, well, the first question is, who's my favorite perfumer? I would say it's somewhere between a few. I guess Dominique Ropillon would be number 1. I do like François Demachy because he's created one of my favorite designer fragrances, Dior and Parfum. I like Bertrand Duchaffoul. He's created some great fragrances, and I like his such different, unique notes that he puts together to create unique concoctions. And there's a few others. I like Jacques Cavalier's fragrances, and you know, some of the younger noses as well. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be Dominique Ropillon, and his fragrance Portrait of a Lady I think is a masterpiece, a great creation. So that's one of my favorite fragrances, and I think he's definitely a great perfumer. So number 2 was, how much do I spend on a cologne? So when I first started in this hobby, I was very frugal. I'm still a very frugal person. I try and spend as little as I can and get the most as I can. That's always been something I'm great at. So I'm not going to just shell out money unless there's no deals available, then I will. But I've spent so much money on fragrances, and I've spent very little on fragrances. There's really no limit to what I like. I mean, if I smell something and it's only $10, I'm going to buy it. If I smell something that's $1,000, I'm going to think about it, because that's $1,000. But there are fragrances that you smell sometimes and like, oh my God, that is the most amazing fragrance I have ever smelled. Then it might be worth spending $1,000, but $1,000 is a lot of money. So I have to think twice about that, maybe 3-4 times. If that amazing fragrance is you know, costing me about $500, it might be easier for me to decide to buy that fragrance in comparison to $1,000. But I think the most I've spent on fragrances is about $1,000 for the fragrance. Actually, $1,500 is the amount I spent. It's another Dominique Ropillon fragrance, The Night from Frederic Malle. It was $1,500 at one point. Now it's $1,600. So that is probably the most I've spent because I really like it. It's a great scent, and it's overly animalic. And also it's very long lasting. So you need only a little bit to spray to make that fragrance last all day. So there's all kinds of things I have to look into. If I'm going to like something, I have to look at the performance, how it you know, reacts, and you know, how I experience the fragrance with me, on me, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of factors in it, but I'm not just going to shell out $1,000 or $1,500, because with The Night, it took me many months, if not a couple of years, before I decided to buy it. You know, it's very pricey, very pricey. But I think around $500 and less, I'm probably able to shell out the money if I'm really obsessed with the smell. Much faster with $400, and of course much faster with $300. I think $300 I'm totally fine. Well, as it's getting up to $400, $500, it's going to be a lot, you know, more challenging for me to just, you know, drop my credit card down or Apple Pay or something. But as I get to the $1,000, then it's going to be much more complicated. And then also, in regards to your question number 2, which you also brought up, Xerjoff, you have Naxos and Renaissance. So I would actually buy some samples of this house, or go sample them at a store that sells them to find out what you like. They have such a wide variety of fragrances that I don't think they have anything else that smells like Naxos. I don't think they have anything else that smells like Renaissance, although Renaissance can, I guess, be somewhat distantly related to Neo. You might like Neo, but then again, Naxos and Renaissance are from the less expensive line. You get 100 ml. And it's less expensive than a 50 ml of Neo, which is more expensive. So you have to do a little, you know, research and smell. You know, just get your nose on some of their fragrances. Well, once again, this is the second time I was asked to do a best of Xerjoff fragrances. Probably within the next 3 to 4 months, I'll have that video up there soon. And then the third question from Mikhail says, do I like Gourmand notes the most? So for me, in response to the first question, or not the first question, I think it was a question 2, where I was trained with my mom cooking and my dad gardening and things like that. So cooking, baking, I got to familiarize myself with those kind of notes, really love them. But when I was early on in my journey, I kind of thought that, you know, vanilla was a little more on the feminine side. I don't think it is now. I mean, obviously we eat vanilla. When you're sitting down to have something like vanilla ice cream, you don't say that's a woman's ice cream, I'm not going to have it. So why bother, you know, saying vanilla as a note is feminine? So it's not, to me, it doesn't act feminine to me. It smells great. I love delicious fragrances. I love smelling, you know, all those desserts and things like that. So and I think I talk about those kind of fragrances the most because it's just very cozy. It's just very homey and very delicious. I love them. I don't find them feminine at all. But yeah, early on I thought, you know, these are a little more on the womanly style of fragrances. I'll forget about them and move on from them. Maybe my mom would like this one better. But I opened up to all kinds of notes. There's not many notes that I don't like. There are some that I'm challenged with, but Gourmands are some of my favorites. I love them. And hopefully you will open up to them as well and stop thinking that Gourmand notes are feminine, because they're not. Only time that we're seeing feminine versus masculine fragrances now is at the designers. And the designers want to do this because when they launch a fragrance, there's a woman that's going to advertise their fragrance, right? So that woman is going to advertise a feminine targeted fragrance, and then vice versa. When they're launching a masculine fragrance, they're going to put a man on the cover or on the video or the commercial. So they want to have that distinction, and they want to make sure, you know, this one is for men and this one is for women. But when you smell men's fragrances, as discussed in a previous question, you know, they're all sweet now. Everything is sweet. I mean, go back to the 1980s, 70s, and even the early 90s and smell fragrances from that era to now. They're so unisex. So the fact that men's fragrances are so unisex now should, you know, make you open up to, you know, gourmand fragrances. If they're going to be sweet for men, why not have like vanilla and, you know, chocolate and honey and caramel and fragrances? Anyway, those are my answers to your question. All right, question 10 comes from Colleen. Hi Sebastian, when I first really discovered perfume, my favorite was 24 Faubourg by Hermès. I recently am wearing a Mix and Love by Rado's Gypsy Water, Atelier Cologne Santal Carmen, Serge Lutens Fleur d'Oranger, Juliette Hazegun's Sunny Side Up, and Reminiscence Patchouli. What's your read on my favorites and any suggested additions I should try? Thank you for your insights. So it's a interesting collection of fragrances that Colleen has listed. So she tends to like sandalwood. I see 3 fragrances there that focus on sandalwood, and 2 of them have orange blossom, neroli, orange. So it's the 24 Faubourg, which is more of a classic fragrance, which features orange blossom, and then also the Fleur d'Oranger from Serge Lutens. So what I would recommend is focusing on some more sandalwoody fragrances, and what I would recommend from different brands is Milky Musk 89. You tend to, it seems like you like the sandalwood as a note. It's a woody, creamy fragrance, really, really beautiful. Great cozy experience. Another one would be Santal du Pacifique from Paris Monte Carlo. Both of them are on the creamy sandalwood side. So very, very cozy experiences. So I would try those. Now, as far as patchouli goes, I recommend 2 others for you to try. Something from Maître Parfumeur Gantier, Patchouli 1969, which is a very bright patchouli, but still deep and rich, perhaps a little bit like Reminiscence Patchouli. But if you want something a lot deeper and richer as far as patchouli goes, how about something like Psychedelic from the House of Javoy? And 2 fragrances that are kind of orangey, orange blossomy. Orangea from the House of Perfume Roma, a beautiful, beautiful kind of a creamy orange blossom type of a fragrance, but it's more of orange and the the fruit of the orange, and then also the orange blossom. So it's beautiful wearing experience. And Perfume and Aroma fragrances tend to be very, very long lasting and also oily. I have a video that I did in their boutique in Rome, and they highly recommend you rub the fragrance. You can do it with this because it's so oily. So that's Orangea from Perfume and Aroma. And another one you can try that's a lot fresher and soapier would be something like Sunsong from the house of Louis Vuitton. Now, Fleur d'Oranger has cumin in the notes. So if you like cumin in the notes, then you can go to fragrances that's... I don't want to recommend something daring because some of the cumin notes can be daring, and I feel like Serge Lutens Fleur d'Oranger is a very nice balance of cumin with the orange blossom. I guess I would go to something like Declaration. Perhaps it's male targeted, but it might be a little too male targeted, but maybe Bois Blanc, which also has some light cuminy touches. And then If by RK from also Frappan for sandalwood, but it's also nicely blended with fig milk as a note. So it's a milky, kind of a slightly, I wouldn't say lactonic because it's not like real milk, it's fig milk, but it has very, very creamy, smooth qualities with the sandalwood and the fig milk together. So those are what I would recommend for you if you wanted to, you know, do stuff that you're already familiar with. I'm not really 100% sure what I would recommend for you that's outside of those three different notes categories, but I'd have to do some more thinking. But I would try these 6 or 7 fragrances that I recommended. Okay, question 11 comes from Aaron. I've noticed your love of amber orientals and no love for Ohira by this house. I actually don't know if you have reviewed it or anything from this house before, but I would love to get your thoughts on the house. Alright, Aaron is speaking about Stephane Humbert Lucas, which for me, I know about the brand, I've known about the brand for a long time, but for me, they're underrepresented or hardly, if at all, represented here where I live. And in general, in the USA, it's hard for me to find this brand. I have shot a video with Stephane a couple of years ago, and unfortunately he spoke in French, so I don't think I aired that video. You can search for Stephane Humbert Lucas on the channel, and anything that I have about the brand should pull up. So there is that video, but I think what happened was I ended up shooting another video with his assistant, and that's the video on the channel. But recently, also last weekend, if you haven't caught that video, I did a video on my favorite perfume bottles, and I featured Col de Bahrain, this one right here. Beautiful bottle with a beautiful cap, as you can see. So I don't own much else from this brand, and the thing is, when I travel to places that do sell this brand, I'm so overwhelmed with so many different brands, I end up forgetting about the brand. But I know they have great fragrances. I want to really dive into this house a lot more, but I just wish that they were represented here, and I can go to a store and, you know, spray the fragrance and to experience it, because that's the best way for me to experience fragrances, to keep going back to a fragrance that is easy to access. For me, if I'm traveling, I can't go to that place over and over and over again. So that's why I've kind of like left that brand behind. So sometimes there are certain brands I don't speak about. There might be a reason behind it, because I don't like the brand, but I don't have any, you know, I do like this brand. I want to explore it more, but I just wish I had more access to it. For me, I don't like samples. I don't like buying samples. So wearing samples to experience a fragrance versus spraying it from a actual, you know, from the bottle, I much prefer to spray it from a bottle because it sprays better. I get to hold it. I get to experience it. So hopefully in the future I'll dig right into this house, Stephane Humbert Lucas. But as of now, there's only a few times I've mentioned the brand on the channel, and you can search on the channel to pull up those videos. Okay, question 12 comes from Damien. Hi Sebastian, big fan of your channel. I've been watching you for the past 3 years, and you are definitely the most informative fragrance channel on YouTube. My passion for fragrance was ignited when I was a teenager, when I would sneak sprays of my dad's Gucci Envy and Fahrenheit, and ever since I was hooked. Some of my favorite fragrances include Bentley for Men Intense, Dior Homme Intense, Maison Margiela by the Fireplace, Costume National Homme, Cartier Declaration. But my all-time favorite fragrance is Frederic Malle's Musc Ravageur. I wear it most days, but I was hoping you could recommend some other alternatives that are a little bit cheaper, as I tend to really pump through the fragrance, so a bottle doesn't really last too long for me. Thanks for reading and hope you are having a great day, Damien. I understand Musc Ravageur can be very, very addicting, and it is on the pricey side. And there are, you know, much less expensive alternatives. And then there's two that I would really recommend that I think would be great alternatives. They're not identical, they're not gourmand alternatives to Musc Ravageur, but they're definitely musky. The first one, of course, I recommend this all the time, is the original musk from the Kiehl's house. Now, I've been hearing that this has gone through reformulations where it's not long lasting anymore, which I never thought it lasted quite a long time. But it's a 50 ml bottle for about $45, so it's really, really inexpensive. You can buy two for 100 ml and it'll still be under $100. And Kiehl's does deals. Last December, they had a 25% off deal, so I ended up buying 4 bottles and gave them away as gifts. So they do deals, and you can buy two, as I said, for about $100, or if they have a deal, you can, you know, save on it and have one in your bag you carry, and then one at home you keep, and you just replenish, you know. And I think it's a great musk. Just it's musky like Musc Ravageur. It just doesn't have the gourmand touches, and perhaps you can, you know, layer it with a vanilla or a caramel or something, but I think it's perfect on its own because it's just the kind of musk I like, that I enjoy spraying here and there, and you know, just it's cozy. It's a cozy musk, and it smells like authentic musk, you know, like real deer musk, but it's all synthetic, and it smells fantastic. Very, very highly recommended. I recommend it even because even if it doesn't last a long time, I think, as I said, buy 2 bottles, pay around $100, keep one in your bag or wherever you travel with, or your car, and just replenish, you know. I think that's what you should do. And another one I recommend is Marlou's Carnicure, this one right here. Now this one actually is even more of a musk. It has light animalic touches. Perhaps it gets more animalic on certain body chemistries. For me, I felt like the animalic touches are not overly strong, which I really, really love. It's very, very sexy. It's definitely like a real true deer musk. And this one has animalic notes. I believe it's got civet listed as notes, but they also list sweet notes. So they're sweet notes. So I think the combination, again, once again, it's not like Musc Ravageur. It's maybe a little bit between this and Musc Ravageur, but you're not going to get to the Musc Ravageur gourmand touches, because Musc Ravageur for me is a gourmand musk. This is, you know, kind of bordering gourmand musk, not quite a gourmand musk, but a very, very, very sexy musk. This one to me, I think, is about $120 for a 50 ml. So it's almost, it's a little more than a double the price. I guess it gets close to Musc Ravageur's price, but not quite if you buy 2 bottles. It's still less expensive than what Musc Ravageur sells for. I think Musc Ravageur is around $300 for 100 ml. So if you buy 2 of these, it's going to be about $240 maybe, perhaps, something like that. But it's a little more challenging to get this one. But between the two, judging from the fact that Damien's in Australia, this one might be a lot easier to get. So get a couple of these and see what you think. Play around with it. Start layering, maybe. Find something that's caramelly, that's inexpensive. Layer it together. You know, control your sprays with one. Increase the other one until you have something kind of close. It's never going to be identical because I think Musc Ravageur also has spices and things like that. So yeah, I think it does. So you'll figure it out, but I think these two are great inexpensive alternatives, or less expensive alternatives to Musc Ravageur. Now I know there's a fragrance out there from a Italian pharmaceutical fragrance house, which I've never put my nose on. It's also less expensive. Hopefully in the future I will get a bottle, because I've been looking and I can't find it. But there is that house as well, and people say that it's very, very close to Musc Ravageur. Either way, that's what I would do as far as replacements or alternatives for Musc Ravageur. And that was the last question for you today. 12 different questions. Hopefully they were answered as perfectly as possible. If you have any questions or comments, please do list in the comments section so I can find out. If you have any questions for me for future videos, you can always send them to lfsgquestions@gmail.com. As I said, I'm not responding to every question. I'm not able to do a video on every question, but I'm doing as much as I can. I'd see if I can increase these question and answer videos, but I think once every other week would be a great, you know, ratio of doing them as frequent as possible. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, as I said, but do look for some of these questions as separate videos in the near future. I will cut them up and air them separately as separate videos so that you guys can find them much easier with their own titles, etc., etc. Anyway, please do like this video, please share it, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.